So just wanted to say good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Simon Joseph. I'm the marketing manager here at In-House Recruitment, the fastest growing community for in-house recruiters and HR professionals in the industry. Today's webinar is in partnership with Candidate.ID, a talent pipeline automation software. The title of today's webinar is How to Apply World Marketing to Talent Acquisition, which is a really hot topic in the industry at the moment, and we're delighted to be joined by Adam Gordon, co-founder and CEO of Candidate.ID, and Emma Fulton, head of marketing planning at CAPITA. And they'll be our speakers for the next 30 minutes or so. Before we get underway, I have a little bit of housekeeping for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the questions to your right, that could be your left, and we will make sure to come back to this at the end of the presentation. Now, without any further ado, I'll hand over to Emma, who's going to get us started. So, Emma, over to you.
Hi. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. I've tried to ensure that everything I have is on snooze, so I'm not interrupted by any of my colleagues who thinks it's hilarious to message me.
Just to say,
sorry.
While this is all kind of loading, I wanted to let you know again, if you have any questions for anyone who's just joining us, please make sure to type them in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll come back to them at the end of both presentations. That way we make sure we keep on schedule, and if there are any questions that we can't get to, I'll pass them over to the guys, either Adam or Emma, and we'll be able to post them in the resources page after the webinar. So thanks.
This isn't coming up for me, my share screen.
Emma, do we want to just try removing your stream and then trying again?
Yeah.
Sorry about the technical issues, everyone. We will be with you very shortly. Like I said, if you have any questions prior to the presentation starting, please feel free to post them. Oh, there we go.
Oh. Sorry about that. Okay, so I just wanted to talk to you really and explain how we go about in the British Army setting up and organising a marketing campaign and the challenges that we go through for recruitment and how we try to overcome those. So just to start off to say that recruiting for the Army is probably pretty unique in terms of the talent acquisition world. We have pretty high numbers that we need to recruit for. So this year we're looking to get applications for regular soldier from 80,000 people. We need to recruit just over 9,000 regular soldiers. We also then have the officer roles on top of that, and also the reserves. So that's pretty large numbers, but you know, that's not it's not ridiculous in the world at the moment. But What is difficult is actually trying to encourage people to think of the army as a viable option, and that's because our MTA, which is our main target audience, they've changed quite a lot over the years. So we do quite a lot of research to try to understand who they are and what they're looking for, so we can really target our marketing campaigns in the way that they respond to. So what do we know at the moment, and what are our challenges? Well, we know we have record levels of employment at the moment. Typically, the army has always done well in the past when unemployment has been higher. There's also a lot of competition around, and the number of actually our target audience is 16 to 24-year-olds, and the number of in that area have declined. We also have quite interesting fact of a decreasing sphere of influence. So only 7% of the people we're targeting know of somebody in the military. Now, for us, that then causes that's quite a big challenge, because actually there's a lot of misconceptions about what the army is. So in order to do some of the research that we do quite a lot of interesting things, and this was a hatch tank that we put together of around 30 to 40 people who we asked over a period of time a number of different questions just to find a little bit more information out. And this particular study, we asked that if they had the military at a party, how would they describe people in the army, in the Navy and in the Air Force, and we asked them about pictures and all different things. And believe it or not, the thing that people resonated with the army was Dad's Army, which we were pretty surprised about, because I don't know when the last time that was on TV, but I wouldn't have thought it was something that was particularly familiar to people. But that is actually the opinion that a lot of people had. When we asked them about the parties, that what would be the people there, and they said that they felt the ladies' man would be a Marine, and the army would be loud and laddish. So that just sort of told us a little bit about the preconceptions that people have. The slide I'm showing you at the moment, when we sort of start to break down the audience and what's available to us in terms of recruitment, we have people who are out and out rejectors. They're never going to want to join the army. And then we have a group of people who at the top are main, they're the people that are probably going to apply anyway. The army is something they've always wanted to do. And in the middle, we have people that are quite keen, but need a bit of influencing. And then we have a group of people that we've referred to as non-rejectors. Now, these are people who maybe have never thought about the army, but potentially we could try to influence because they're not out and out rejectors for us. So we break down our population like that, so we know what our audience actually is. Now, that seems like quite a lot of people to go out and target, but then we overlay some of the eligibility that the army have into that, and it starts to take those numbers a bit lower. So one of the main issues is the medical exclusions that the army have. So you can't join the army if you've got things like heart conditions, that sort of thing, because you have to be physically fit. But there's a number of other elements that make it even more challenging. So asthma is an issue, beards are an issue, and the other element actually, which is quite interesting now, is sort of BMI and the ranges that you need to be within there. So actually, for people that want to join, a lot of the time they need to do a little bit of work beforehand to get fit in order to do that, which is another challenge that we have. So when we break down that audience into what's available to us, we come out with segments, which are effectively what we use to build our personas. So we have our 6 segments that we use, and I've just put a little bit of it, some information around there, which is some of the key things they're looking for. So we've broken those segments down into barriers and drivers. So we know what motivates them and what appeals about a military career, and also some of the things that they're particularly concerned about. And I will show you a bit later on how we use that to target people as well. I've just done a couple of examples here of the segments. This is segment 1. And this is some of the information we use to build the persona, so we understand about their social consumption, how they look at media. And I think these slides will probably be shared, so you can have a look at these in a bit more detail. And this is segment 6. So they're quite different segments. Some similarities certainly, but in segment 1, they tend to be people that are more likely to want to join some of our combat roles, and segment 6 are more likely to be interested in reserve elements.
Oh, Emma.
My laptop's frozen. I do apologize.
There we go.
Sorry. So we then use a lot of that research to build a campaign, and we have, at the moment, we're in a reiteration of something which we've called the Belonging campaign, which started 2 years ago. And we've got just some results here of that. We do quite a lot of work around checking when we advertise, when we do the advertising. And the graph that you can see on the left there is from facial coding that we do. So that tracks, we put people in a room, and a bit like with other UX experience, the way you might look at website usage and where people's eyes go, it follows little patterns on their face that show how emotionally engaging a advert is with them. And we know that from history, the more likely that people are going to interact with something is the more emotionally engaged they are with it. So it's something that that we take quite proud of, that our adverts are score a little bit higher than our competitors there. We've also, our applications at the moment are still, and that goes into this year as well, at a 5-year high. This is just an example of Army interest, which is something else that we track. It's one of our key KPIs that we look at. And that's where we look at also parents in that space as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this year's campaign, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen. So in 2017, we started off just looking at belonging, and we knew from the research that we were doing that the element of teamwork and that sort of thing was really important for our audience. So we tried to bring that to life in the advertising. Then we moved into, the research was showing us that although that campaign was resonating with people, people could see that the Army potentially was a great career and had options, but they didn't think they fitted. So this was where we then tried to move into trying to show that people like you could be in the Army. And so this was trying to be quite explicit and have images of females, of different ethnic backgrounds, and try to challenge some of those misconceptions. You can have emotions and be in the Army, and so forth. We got a little bit of controversy that came up at that point, and we discovered that the PR effect from that was quite high for us. So this year's campaign, we wanted to move that message on a little bit more, and move it into the sphere of doing something that really matters. So employment being quite high, lots of people are in jobs, but perhaps they're feeling a little bit undervalued in that role. And we wanted to show that the Army has, allows you to do a job that does matter. With the element of, with the PR effect, we wanted to do something to launch the campaign that was a little bit controversial. and I will just sort of talk about the posters that we did, which people may have seen in a moment. So this was some of the stats that went behind wanting to move forward into that sphere of showing that we could give them a job with purpose. And it's just more evidence behind that here. So this was our proposition that sat behind the architecture for the campaign. And I will just read that out because I know you can all see that, but it's quite a powerful statement. So this is the generation that's been written off by many, the generation described as snowflakes by the media. This is the generation that people don't think much of. This is the generation with the skills, the attitude, the drive to succeed, an army that's just not in the army yet. We can help you find where you belong. We see you, we see your potential, and we can give you a job that lets you do something that matters. But in truth, it's not you that needs us. Your army needs you. And that was quite an emotive statement for a lot of people. And we wanted that to really resonate through the campaign. I haven't included any of the adverts here, but they're all available on YouTube if anyone isn't familiar with them. We had 3 TV adverts, which were a girl who working in a supermarket being undervalued, a guy playing computer games, and somebody somebody seeing him and thinking he was wasting his life, and then somebody who was kind of acting the fool in a role, and again challenging that misconception that that those sorts of behaviours are perhaps negative, that we sort of see more value there. So this is our campaign architecture and how we set about going planning the campaign. And along the top there, you'll see what I suspect Adam will talk about a bit in a moment in his presentation, which is the marketing funnel there. So we start off with launch, and as I said, we try to do a little bit of PR there and try to get some additional reach. We have a pretty large budget to work with, but still, in order to gain the reach that we need to try to move what is effectively advertising into popular culture and try to get the press talking about it. Dave Trott tells us that 89% of advertising is generally ignored. Ad blocking is rife. I think probably most people on this call will have seen adverts this morning in some form, whether that was scrolling through your social media, hearing something on radio, perhaps watching TV this morning, however you've been sort of spending your day, or even just in emails. But honestly, I suspect a lot of people just scrolled straight past that and didn't pay a huge amount of attention to it. So it's difficult. It's getting harder and harder for people to do something that's actually noticeable. And that's really where we sort of come out with our out-of-home advertising and what it's trying to achieve. We then move into sort of more of an always-on element. Our campaign is always on because our audience is, and we're trying to inspire and inform there. And then hopefully move people into acting and actually clicking on our website. And I'll show you some of the further architecture that we have. So that previous slide talked a lot around our headline campaign, which is has to be quite generic. It has to apply for all elements within the army. It has to work for regular soldier, officer, and all of the different trades that you could go into. We then have activation campaigns under that as we start to learn more about our audience through their behaviour. And this slide, which looks very complicated, but is a marketing funnel again. And that sort of just shows what I've tried to put in here is just thinking about how we go down creating that initial awareness and then building interest. So once we've started to get that interest level up and hopefully people have started to interact with our digital, digital journeys, we'll then start to learn a lot more about them. And this is where we can then be a bit more specific with our campaigns. So as we learn about that audience, we might target them with officer, junior entry type messaging, something around apprenticeships or trades, but also we'll start to bring in some of the barriers and drivers that we know from our segments there. So we'll start to talk about salary, travel opportunities, fear of, just the fact that the army is an all-consuming role and losing family ties, that sort of thing. And then we take people into the application, and one of the bits that we have to make sure we continue to do, which is probably a little bit different to a number of other attract roles, is that from application, it can take around 12 months sometimes for some people to get into basic training. Now, that might be dependent on the roles that they're going for. They might not be available. Certain roles, the Army only need about four or five per year. Others obviously have some of the more engineering-based combat type roles. There will be loading month on month, and so therefore we can kind of go at the pace of the candidate there. But because the Army is more than a job, it's a lifestyle, that's quite a big decision for a lot of people, and some people aren't ready to move in that quickly. So we need to still do quite a lot of nurturing, helping people to get fit at that point, and just trying to make sure they don't drop out of the pipeline at that point. But from a lot of the research that we do, we know that a lot of people who make the decision to join have done it quite early on. So our job starts out sort of years out almost in terms of trying to get that awareness and interest building. So I just wanted to end with these posters, which a lot of people will have seen and were pretty controversial. They were Marmite, and kind of that was the point of it really, was to try to broaden our reach. So although TV still works for us, we need to try to bring in, a different audience and bring things in. So with doing this and gaining the media attention that we did, we actually managed to get a PR reach of 4.8 billion in the first week, which was effectively free media for us. The campaign initial results in January when we launch is always pretty high, and we actually on the day after launch had the highest number of applications for any day of the previous year. We achieved the highest January that we'd ever had and exceeded our targets massively. And that trend's actually continued in through this year. We have peaks and troughs seasonality, as you would expect, but actually in terms of applications, we are performing quite well. So that is it. I'm hopefully going to stop sharing my screen now and not have any other technical issues. But any questions, do let me know.
Thank you very much, Emma. That was great. So yeah, everyone, if like Emma said, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the question box on the right, and we'll come to them at the end following Adam's. I believe Adam is just loading up his session now. Just to give you a bit of a heads up, Adam, you are still on mute. So when that starts very soon, if there's anyone that has any questions, like I said, feel free to put it in the question box on the right-hand side of the screen. Adam, there you are. Thank you for joining us. I will now hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. And thanks very much, Emma. I'm going to use a couple of the examples that you've talked about in your presentation when I'm describing some of the powerful concepts and tactics that I think organizations should apply to their talent acquisition from a marketing perspective. Now, not all organizations, of course, have got the budget to apply a full-scale marketing operation to their talent acquisition in the way that Emma does at the British Army. And I'm going to talk about a lot of things that you need to know about and that you can do, which costs you either nothing or almost nothing. So the first vital concept I want to talk about is the fact that we're living in a world now where everybody is deluged with communication coming in on multiple devices, through multiple channels, in videos, in infographics, in white papers, in blogs, through email, through text message, through WhatsApp. It's very, very difficult for people to switch off. It's also very difficult for people to filter all of the different communications they're receiving. So you end up in a crazy situation where people like this lady is taking her laptop to the toilet. People are starting to become very good at filtering things out though. And so what we're competing with when we're trying to get our recruitment messages to potential candidates, we're not competing with other organizations that are trying to recruit the same people. We're also competing with Facebook. We're competing with the Daily Mail. We're competing with Instagram. We're competing with uniform dating. We're competing with lots of different individuals and organizations that are trying to get mind share with those people that we want to hire. So we really need to do things to stand out. Recent research has shown that an average human is going to continue to subscribe to and engage with around 10 different organizations each week. That means that there's space for 10 organizations to communicate with that person and get regular messages to them. It's really important that you try and become one of those 10. So how are we going to be able to do that? I'll talk through some tactics later. Another concept that I think is really important is we used to be able to set out journeys. Up until about 5 years ago, we were able to set out journeys and candidates would follow, or people, individuals would follow a predictable journey when we're trying to get them to go through our sales funnel or our communication funnel. Now, people act in a much, much more erratic way today because of mobile devices specifically. So everybody has a mobile phone pretty much, and they're getting communication from so many different places. They're dotting in and out of different websites. They're looking at different bits of content. If a web page doesn't load within 2 seconds, they're gone. And we describe this as the flight of the bumblebee. So people's journeys are much, much more hard to predict. And how we adapt to this is, yes, by creating pathways, but also trying to be effectively everywhere we want them to be. People are going to go and look for information about what it's like to work at your organization when they're ready to do that. We want to make sure that we make it easy for them to find that information. The reason we call it the flight of the bumblebee, the way that candidates interact today, is because bumblebees' flight patterns are completely unpredictable, which is unlike almost every other flying creature. Talk briefly about spearfishing. So most recruitment marketing is what I would term net fishing. That means that the definition of success is a big catch, but unfortunately, there's a very labor-intensive way of going about getting your jobs filled, because you've got to catch a lot of fish. You've got to throw a lot of them back. You've got to throw a lot of them back because they're not quite right for the dinner table, in your case, of course, for that vacancy. So what we really want to do is to undertake a lot of hard work using marketing, automation techniques, which mean that when it comes to filling a vacancy, your recruiters can go spearfishing, and they're not having to start all that net fishing and the time-consuming work involved in going and trying to get your arms around everybody that might be able to do that job. We want to do that up front, and we want to do that using marketing and automation-related techniques. Spearfishing is what we want our recruiters doing, so that they're spending their valuable human time just talking to those candidates who are ready for a conversation and who are right for the role, not trying to start conversations with people who we don't know whether they are even alive, let alone ready for a conversation yet. So when we think about the equivalent changes that have happened on the sort of mainstream marketing, sales and marketing world, we know that B2B pipelines are now 100% marketing generated in the most sophisticated organizations. What that means is salespeople are not cold calling prospective customers. They're using marketing related techniques to serve up hot leads to salespeople, and most of their conversations with prospects are warm conversations. In recruitment, we haven't adapted yet. 95% of candidate conversations are what we call sales generated. So the recruiter is going to be, the vacancy gets signed off for an internal auditor. The recruiter then goes and spends time on social media trying to find internal auditors and reaches out to those people, tries to get them on the phone, contacts people maybe at their desk, and it's a sales related approach. What we really need to be doing, as I said, is we want marketing to be generating hot candidates. And that doesn't necessarily mean advertising. It means other techniques. Another thing that I think is really important to talk about is candidates are, or people we might hire, are changing the way that they think about the working world. So the average length of service is 2.6 years in a role, and it's coming down by a month every year. So people are in roles for shorter periods of time than they ever were. As a result, we're coming into an age where people are they're working in an organization once, they're then coming back to that organization 5, 6, 7 years later, and then again, and then again. So by the time the generation that's entering the workforce now have retired, a lot of those people will have worked for the same organization more than one time. And as a result, what we need to be thinking about is building relationships with individuals that you might hire throughout the course of their career, and not just at the ephemeral points where you've got a vacancy that's suitable for them. We want to make this a much more long-term process and a long-term relationship building process. Some of the things that I think we need to be doing in terms of maintaining those ongoing relationships are educating and being useful to those people, even when they're not looking for a job, even when you're not hiring somebody like them. That long-term relationship building process is going to make a massive difference to the way that you can get to shortlist much faster when the vacancies do get signed off. So another thing that's really important to understand about the way the candidate journeys have changed is candidates could go from being cold through to warm, through to hire ready on their own. When I started in recruitment in 1999, they could get through to going from cold to maybe warm, maybe starting to understand about opportunities, but then they had to talk to a recruiter to get a lot more information. Today, they don't have to. They can get right through the process on their own using publicly available information. As a result, candidates are not revealing themselves as people that might be interested in the opportunity until they've done a lot more self-directed research. We need to understand what those people are doing and laying out candidate journeys, laying out content that's going to be useful and relevant for those people, and being able to track and score what they're doing means that we know which people are cold, warm, and hire ready, and that saves recruiters a lot of time. So if, for example, we understand that John has opened an email in the last week, but did nothing else, whereas Jane opened an email, clicked a link, looked at a landing page, looked at your company on Glassdoor and on YouTube, and the hiring manager's LinkedIn profile and the job description, you know that Jane is much, much more likely to be ready for a conversation than John. If you've got 500 Johns and Janes, it's likely that around 20 to 30 of them are going to be like Jane. You need to understand who those people are so that your recruiters can go spearfishing instead of net fishing. They're valuable human time. I hear it regularly. A recruiter tells me they've got 40 open recs. Well, it's very, very difficult to fill 40 open recs if you don't know which candidates are cold, warm, and hire ready. Making your data, creating transparency within your existing database, massive time saver. Now moving on to some of the tactical things that you can do. These are all things that you can do yourself. So the first thing is to think about the regular versus irregular hiring and apply different tactics to each. So for the for the regular hires, so for a company like PepsiCo, that's going to be things like national account managers, brand, food technologists. For a company like Barclays, it's going to be risk people, bankers, auditors, digital. They want to think about a farming approach and using their existing database and nurturing all of the people on that existing database is the right way of going about making recruitment easier and easier for that internal team. For those irregular hires, such as John Lewis, 2 years ago, John Lewis hired 1 shepherd and 1 lifeguard, for example. There's no point in farming pipelines of candidates for those roles if they're very, very irregular. So taking the hunting approach for those kinds of roles is absolutely the right thing to do. Just going back to this, what I would say is for regular hires, I would say that's 10 or more of the same types of hires every year. To me, that would be the grounds for creating a candidate pipeline and for nurturing that pipeline, what we call farming that population. In terms of the regular hires, because I think that's where you can make the biggest impact, marketing can make the biggest impact on making regular hires faster, less expensive, higher quality, etc. Think about the total addressable market. So who are all of the people that might be able to do that job? For very high volume roles like people working in retail stores, people working in call centers, that's quite difficult to achieve. But if you're PwC and you're hiring tax managers in financial services in London, there's probably 2,000 of them maximum. It's quite easy to identify who are all those and kind of get your those people, be able to create transparency and understand who those people are. Once you know who all those people are, that's your addressable market. That's the people that you should be focused on nurturing. In terms of talent pipelines, people use this term to mean different things, but my definition of a talent pipeline is that only exists when you know who's cold, who's warm, and who's hire ready. If you don't know that, you don't have a talent pipeline. A group of people on a CRM is not a talent pipeline. A list of people on a spreadsheet is not a talent pipeline. A list of people on a pad of paper is not a talent pipeline. A pipeline really only exists when you know who's cold, who's warm, who's hire ready. In the past, the only way to go about doing that was to really call all of the people on your database. And when I started in recruitment, we had to do that. I was working 3 nights a week. We'd work till 8 o'clock to spend a couple of hours at the end of the day contacting people after work and finding out how they're getting on. Do you still like your boss? Are you still happy with what you're getting paid? And all those kinds of things. And trying to unearth who might be ready for a conversation. If you've got 300 or less candidates within your sort of addressable market, then that's achievable manually. Most people have got a much higher database than that, much larger database than that. So you need automation techniques to be able to understand who's cold, warm, hire ready. This is about tracking and scoring each person's interactions with your content online. Think back to John and Jane. We were able to understand that all John did was open an email. We understood that Jane did a lot of different things across multiple different online sources. Jane was clearly much more ready for a conversation. So this is how you go about at scale with 1 million candidates on your database, determining which of them are cold, warm, and hire ready, and serving up hot leads to recruiters. Communities. We think about the concept of communities as being very, very powerful for building goodwill, generating rapport between you and the people you might want to hire. The very, very best example of this that I've seen in recruitment, and almost, again, it's another term, talent communities, People talk about talent communities. I ask them about their talent community, and it's a list. It's a list of names and email addresses. That's definitely not a community. So Green Club is an initiative by Specsavers, which is events. It's offline events. It's an online website with lots of great information for optometrists, a discussion board, ways to interact. It's all about skills for optometrists. It's all about technology. It's all about techniques. It's all about how to make the profession of optometry better and how to be a better optometrist. It doesn't mention Specsavers anywhere. It is run by Specsavers recruitment and learning and development teams. And of course, they use internal learning and development content. They use their internal experts to create and share a lot of the information on here. And in return, they're generating goodwill. What they're able to do is understand which people are going from Green Club to then going and taking a look at Specsavers, the website, the career site, what's it like to work there. This is hot leads. This is a brilliant talent community, which is a major part of this organization's talent pipeline. Talent brand, to me, is a concept which is all about using the people that work for your organization to convey what it's really like to work here. Don't give them a script. It needs to be their words. Here's one example from Sally Abbott at Weetabix. Her LinkedIn profile says why she joined Weetabix, and it says why she loves working for Weetabix. The opportunity to work with a diverse, ambitious, and passionate team, fantastic brands, huge ambition for growth, and fantastic resources to work with. For anybody that's coming in for an interview with Sally Abbott, or that is maybe even just going for a role in Weetabix, they might want to understand who's the managing director of this business. So they'll go into that person's LinkedIn profile. 3/4 of candidates, according to our research, 3/4 of candidates who come in for an interview today are looking at the interviewer's LinkedIn profile before going into the interview. So what do your hiring manager's LinkedIn profiles say? What do your hiring manager's general social media profiles say about why they joined the business, why they love working for the business, how they motivate their team? Just going back to talent brand, video, brilliant, brilliant channel. Video is the highest performing channel from our research. And so it's the highest performing content format. And if you go and take a brief from a hiring manager who's looking to hire, it's the financial controller, they're looking to hire financial accountants, just take your phone into that briefing. Ask that person, why did you join the company? How do you motivate your team? What are the most exciting things your team's going to be working on in the next 18 months? And what are the skills you think people need to develop their careers as a financial accountant or to become the financial controller? 20-second videos each. This is brilliant, brilliant information that you can share with potential candidates. Brilliant information for your career site and for your general kind of talent nurture. Not everybody's going to say yes to this, of course, not every hiring manager, but a lot of them will. And for those who do, when they start to see better results and they start to share, I'm getting better results because I'm communicating more effectively with potential candidates, others will start to say, okay, I'll do it as well. Employer branding is a really, really complex subject. Your employer brand is what people think of working for your organization. Your employer brand is different to every person that knows about your organization. Employer branding is the task of trying to create a brand or trying to convey what it's like to work at your organization. For me, 80% of people are not in the market. They're not looking for job opportunities. They don't care about your job descriptions. They don't care about your EVP or what it's like to work in your organization. But the skills that you apply to employer branding can be used to communicate with those 80% who don't care about that job description. So things like skills, industry insights, general useful and relevant information is the sort of thing that potential candidates are going to be interested in, and that is going to get them to keep clicking so that when they are ready for an opportunity, your company is immediately an organization that they're thinking about going and taking a look at your career site and taking a look at your job descriptions. So although the kind of content I'm talking about doesn't directly link to your organization, it still conveys a message about your employer brand, because it's coming from individuals in your organization and it's generating goodwill from the people that you might want to hire. Sourcing's another really complex subject, and it's changing very fast. So identifying candidates is becoming less and less of a challenge. There are tools that automate this. Most people are online. A lot of the people you want to hire are on LinkedIn. Some of them are on places like Facebook, GitHub, Instagram, and other social networks where you can find out great information about them. Lots of tools aggregate this information, and it's becoming easier to find everybody, even if you're not a technical sourcer. For me, the future for sourcing teams is around nurturing pipelines, and it's around data analysis. So it's about sharing information with the people that you might want to hire in the future, monitoring what's working, what's continuing to engage them and getting them clicking. And when those people appear to be ready for a conversation, then having that human contact with them. So I believe that that's changing slightly, because identification of individuals is no longer the biggest challenge as it was maybe 5 or especially 10 years ago. To go about nurturing the people that you might want to hire in the future, we think about the kind of content you might want to share in this kind of format. So content for those that are cold, those that are warm, those that are hire ready. Content for those that are cold is not job descriptions. It's not your employer brand. But what we know from our data is things like industry insights, talent development or skills, career advice. That kind of content is what those people want. Even if they're not looking for a job, they will keep clicking on that kind of content. For those that are warm, that's what we would term traditional employer branding. For those that are what we call hire ready, which means they would say yes to a conversation about opportunities with your organization, the sort of content that's going to be more of a deep window into what's it really like to work there. So the kind of like the short videos, the 20-second video from the hiring manager, for example. Now, what we want to do using technology is we want to serve up really personalized experiences. And you can only do this if you're tracking and scoring the things that your candidates are doing. So we want John, if we know that John likes industry insights in a video format through email, that's what automatically John should be receiving that kind of content. Whereas Jane's clicking on career advice in an infographic format through social media, that's the kind of thing that actively Jane should keep doing. We want to create candidate journeys that adapt with every click the candidate makes. They're completely dynamic, and it's like a yellow brick road that kind of lays out in front of each candidate as they go in the direction that they want to go in. And then in order to really make sense of who's cold, who's warm, who's hire ready, we want to score those interactions. So down at the bottom, you can see this is channels and formats. If somebody opens an email, for example, we would score that low. Whereas if they're looking at a blog or a video or something like that, we would score that much higher. Down the left-hand side, this is content subjects. If somebody's looking at industry news or skills, we would score that quite low. Whereas if they look at your career-focused event, job search, or job description, we would score that much higher. So it's a logical scoring model. You will have a different scoring, even if you're hiring lots of software engineers and lots of salespeople, you will have a different scoring model for both of these job disciplines, because as groups, their behavior differs. And what you really want is alerts coming into your recruiters to tell them when candidates are doing meaningful activities. So for example, if they look at a job description, but they don't yet apply, your recruiter should know that information so that they can go and make contact with that person straight away. Or they do a combination of other meaningful activities, like we saw from Jane earlier, having looked at the Glassdoor page and the hiring manager's LinkedIn and other subjects. In terms of GDPR, big subject, simple fix. Unless you're a German bank, then you're going to be able to claim legitimate interest as the legal basis for retaining that person's data. If you can track and score that your candidates continue to interact with your organization, then you don't need to get them to keep opting in every 6 months or every 12 months or every 18 months, depending on, of course, your organization's privacy policy. If you do have to get them to keep opting in, but they're receiving a highly personalized experience, and they will mark your organization as one of the 10 pieces of weekly content they're receiving that they will keep reviewing, and they'll keep opening those emails or text messages or social media messages, then you've got the mind share and you can show the ongoing relationship as the legitimate interest. Of course, don't take my advice as being legal, but there's a lot of organizations. It's very heartbreaking to me when I hear about organizations that have gone and deleted 50,000 candidate records because they weren't quite sure how to interact with them and be GDPR compliant. There's lots of different smart ways that you can do that. For the benefit of the candidates, of course, they're getting a highly personalized experience that's really relevant and useful for them. So there's big benefits to the candidates. I hope that's been interesting, some of those concepts and subjects. I'm pretty easy to find online, and I'll hand back over to Simon.
Thank you very much, Adam. So we've got a few more minutes for some questions, and I've seen Emma has responded to one already, which is from Joe, just to kind of read that out if anyone hasn't seen it, which is, which route has the best ROI in a large town, digital advertising or outdoor advertising? And Emma's response was, digital is far cheaper and allows you to target your audience and even personalize. It depends though what your goal is. If it's wider brand, out of home can get much broader reach. So thank you for that, Emma. That was kind of got back on track. And so we've got a couple of others. So one from Stephen. I believe this was in relation to your presentation, Emma. So what do you feel about advertising on Instagram and or Facebook? So if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, when we do all social channels, and Instagram particularly works well for us in terms of stories. We do quite a lot of partnerships on there. So we use our own social, the Army social, but we also do partnerships with Lad Bible and get reach through their audience in that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I could just add one thing about that, which is that advertising with Instagram and Facebook is about to change quite a lot, because there's a couple of different Facebook advertising products, including Facebook Pixel and Facebook lookalike audiences, which are getting a lot of challenge from regulatory bodies in the USA and in Europe. And there's certain aspects to that are probably going to get shut quite soon. However, as of today, advertising on Facebook, you probably can't get more personalized than that and more targeted. So make hay while the sun shines.
Fantastic. So I think we'll do one more from Emma's kind of set of questions, I believe, which is, I hope we can touch base, this is from Pauline as well, I hope we can touch base on the marketing techniques that help to generate candidates you mentioned before. Really curious to find out about those options in more detail. So if you wouldn't mind, and what I'm thinking is we'll also kind of go into a little bit more detail post-webinar, and we'll add this to the page. But so if you wouldn't mind kind of briefly running through a few marketing techniques that you would recommend to generate candidates, probably both the questions to both of you, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it depends about, for me, I think one of the most important bits is to really understand your audience and know who it is that you're actually targeting, to know where they are. And that's something I think that you can really take from marketing to move into that talent acquisition space. It is much, it's something that's sort of the picture of marketing, I suppose, is to understand who it is that you're targeting in terms of audience. The other bit I think that is probably quite key is the digital nature and tracking your audience and targeting them and not allowing them to those warm leads that Adam talked about to walk away without having seen your messaging. I think if you are broadly going out to people as opposed to sourcing and really phoning, getting in touch with people, and you're just trying to hit them with that brand message, it takes people on average, sort of 5 or 6 views of the brand before it really sits in and resonates with people. So just allowing people to, to sort of have one message sometimes, as Adam's sort of saying, with all this message, all noise effectively that's out there, your message is going to get pretty lost otherwise.
Great. Adam, anything to add to that? I mean, we do have a couple more questions coming your way, so.
Yeah, I mean, for me, nurturing your database is the big thing that very, very few organizations are doing. I saw a statistic recently, which is 4% of the Fortune 500 sends anything more than job descriptions to anybody. So yeah, it's something that most organizations need to be doing a lot more of.
Okay, great. So a couple more, I believe these came through during your presentation, Adam. From Lauren, would you consider Glassdoor to be an important tool for recruiters?
Yes is the answer. I've got mixed feelings about Glassdoor, because it's almost a bit of a protection racket, given you kind of got to pay to keep things kind of clean. But yeah, I mean, candidates are going on there. They're looking at what's it like to work at your organization. But I think they do understand, in the same way that people understand that TripAdvisor attracts people that have had either really good or really bad experiences. I do absolutely believe that people feel the same about Glassdoor, that those who thought it was okay to work there, they probably don't take to Glassdoor and post reviews. So I know that people do take it with a bit of a pinch of salt.
Okay, thank you. What is the best method to track Jane's journey, and if she is viewing the landing page or Glassdoor page, or kind of how do you implement those analytics?
So there's a couple of different things that we do. One is cookie tracking. So they open an email. The email is embedded with a pixel, which activates the cookie. The second thing is IP recognition. So there's various different softwares that can identify the person's IP address. And then the third thing that we use is a component called fingerprint, which is able to determine what the person's device, what their location, what their browser, what their operating system, and various other clues are. You use links on a site that you don't own, such as Glassdoor. You apply trackable links to all of the content that you share on there, and then any websites that you do own, you put tracking scripts onto the website.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I believe that's it. I did. Oh, Carol, I've just seen yours pop through. How did you go about finding out about your audience? Do you do this in-house or via a third party, and how long did it take?
So our specific study was done by a third party, and it took around 4 months of research. It was pretty in depth. There's a heap of different options you can use to do this sort of activity, and how long it takes depends on often about the size of the what you're going out to do, and you can do actually quite a lot just by actually doing some focus groups with people, candidates, asking a group of people who've joined in your organisation a little bit about themselves. It's a bit perhaps not as detailed, but it's still going to tell you a lot of information.
Emma, can I ask you, would you recommend that it's possible to do that yourself, or would you always outsourcing it to specialists?
I think it depends what you're trying to achieve. I think you can do a lot yourself, just to find information out and find where people are. It depends on the size, though, that you've got of a pool of people. So, if you're in a contact center and you're recruiting, hundreds of people there, you've got a pretty good pool to go to ask for information about, what they're doing. If you're looking at a bit more specialist roles and you're only recruiting 2 or 3 of them a year, then that's where you might either need to go externally to find out a little bit more about that pool. But equally, you know, it doesn't have to, even if you do go externally, it doesn't have to be a huge expense. There's quite a lot of, you know, agencies that will help you relatively, relatively cheaply to build some of those personas out for people.
Great. And I've seen, Kate, you've also asked the question, are slides going to be shared following the webinar? There will be a recording of the webinar, so you'll be able to see all the slides again and go through all the questions again and pick up those bits of information that you may have missed. So don't worry about that. That will be sent out following the close of the session. Now, I don't believe there's any further questions come through. So if there's anything else, that's all we have time for today. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Adam and Emma for kind of joining us and educating us on what the benefits of marketing were and how you implement that within a recruitment strategy. To the audience, if you'd like any further information about any of today's discussions, and you can speak directly to the Candidate.ID team or to Adam himself, and potentially try and get in touch with him on LinkedIn or any other method. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you next time.
Thanks, Simon. Cheers. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, everyone.